All right, so here we go, section 2, the objectives, the things that you should really kind of get out of all of this. One is really break down how the Roman Republic grew through a series of conquests. 2, identify events leading to the decline of the Roman Republic. What are those things that are causing the Roman Republic to go away? And then describe what this new age of the Roman Empire was like. So as we go through this, those are the things that you should really be paying attention to and focusing on. So in this, imperialism, this establishing control over foreign lands and people. As Rome expands outwards, they're going to become very imperialistic. Latifundia are these huge farming estates that are bought up by wealthy people during the height of Rome's greatness. They have all kinds of money flowing in, and they use that to buy these luxury estates on the outskirts overlooking the countryside. Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus are two tribunes who see the problems and attempt to deal with them, but they're not received very well by the Senate. Julius Caesar is a military commander who becomes absolute dictator. You could probably point to him as being the guy that leads to the downfall of the Roman Republic. But most people agree by the time of Augustus, it's no longer existent. Census, population count for tax purposes. Well, for other purposes. The Romans used them for tax purposes, and the United States uses them not just for taxes, but also for representation. And then Hadrian is an emperor who codified Roman law and built the wall across Britain. So what factors led to the decline of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire? And there are a series of things that are going on that are going to lead to all of this happening. So first of all, you've got Rome gaining control of the Italian peninsula, and she's going to expand her influence around the Mediterranean Sea. And this expansion is going to cause problems. It's going to cause great things to happen, but at the same point, it's going to cause problems as well. And out of this rubble comes the Roman Empire. So what we have going on here is as they're expanding, you can kind of see this on the map. You have the Roman Republic, which is right in here, and you see this green area being Carthage, and these lines represent all of the areas of Carthage. And so sooner or later, these two places are going to really bump heads. Carthage descended from the Phoenicians, and they are big into trade, and Rome is kind of getting big into trade. And so Rome's going to fight a series of 3 wars with Carthage, which are going to be called the Punic Wars. So in the First Punic War, Rome wins Sicily, Corsica, and Sardinia. And in this First Punic War, Hannibal is a young man and watches his father get defeated. And as his father lay dying several years later, he makes Hannibal promise to get revenge for his defeat. And so Hannibal spends the rest of his life being pretty obsessed in avenging his father's loss. And in the Second Punic War, this is where you really see Hannibal's daring. You could probably call it greatness, even though it's kind of a crazy plan. He's going to cross the Alps, the mountains, with war elephants and surprise the Romans, which he does. Unfortunately, he's so weakened by the time he gets there that he's not able to defeat the Romans. Nevertheless, for the next 15 years, Hannibal is able to go up and down the Italian peninsula, winning battles at will. He just doesn't have enough to capture Rome. And he always kind of thinks that maybe Carthage is going to send reinforcements. They never do. He thinks that some of these conquered territories are going to rise up in rebellion, which they never do. And finally, what happens is you have a Roman leader who realizes, now wait a second, if Hannibal is running up and down the Italian peninsula, who's back home to defend Carthage? And so they launch an attack on Carthage, which forces Hannibal to return home. And in this Third Punic War, Carthage gets destroyed. Hannibal finally gets defeated. Now, one of the popular stories is that salt was poured into land so nothing would grow. I haven't really seen much to prove that. As a matter of fact, this is one of those historically debated stories, whether it's urban legend or whether it's historical fact. Everything I've kind of seen has shown that that simply isn't the truth. Now, however, Carthage is pretty well destroyed after this is all over. And some of this has to be in thanks to Cato, who demagogued the Carthage. He always kind of picked on them as being the cause of all of Rome's problems. Anyway, nevertheless, Hannibal commits suicide, and Carthage, which was fighting to preserve its way of life, is now gone. However, Rome is free to pursue its policy of world domination. And so what happens is, one by one, they expand outward, and they are following this policy of imperialism, of conquering these other areas. They go so far as to begin to take over what was once part of the Greek empires, with Egypt and Macedonia. And then by 133 BC, the Romans can call the Mediterranean Sea the Mare Nostrum, or RC. So here it shows, again, the growth of Rome from this little city to this orange area, to the yellow area, to the green area, to what was Carthage. So it gives you an idea of how big it's getting. So with this conquest comes some problems. You've got this new class of wealthy generals, traders, and officials who are gaining power. And slowly but surely, greed is going to replace some of those more traditional Roman values. They buy up these latifundias. The other thing is you really see Rome becoming this land of excess. You know, who can throw the most lavish party? Who can buy the most expensive stuff? So as long as their army is going well and they're bringing in all these riches, everything's going to be good. But at some point, they're kind of setting themselves up for the crash. And one of the other things that comes out of this is small farmers aren't able to compete with these latifundias, and you've got these pouring in of grains from other places, and it causes the prices of grain to plummet, and these small farmers just can't compete. They lose their farms, they become unemployed, they come to Rome looking for jobs. And now what you have is you have a whole group called the proletariat, these urban homeless people who are just itching for problems. You know, they want jobs, they can't find jobs, and there's unrest growing as corruption and the gap between the rich and the poor expanded. So as they're seeing these triumphs, these huge parades of all of these conquered goods and silver and gold and all of this great stuff that these generals have conquered, and they go marching through the streets, you have this huge group of poor people. Sooner or later, something bad's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. So you see these two plebeians, Tiberius Gracchus, who calls for the state to give land to the poor, and you see his brother Gaius, who sought public funds to buy grain for the poor, trying to make reforms. The senators saw these brothers as threats, and so they ended up getting run out of town, and both of them end up being killed, along with 1,000 of their followers. So they try and fix these problems before they get too bad, but nobody wants to hear about it. They just want to put their head in the sand and pretend it's not going to happen. From this, all it's going to take is a dynamic leader to take advantage of the situation and be able to gain control. And you kind of see this argument over who is it that should really rule Rome. Should it be the Senate, or should it be some of these very popular leaders and generals? And there's threats of slave uprisings, and there are a couple. These Roman legions, thanks to the work of Marius and Sulla, Marius makes it so that poor people who aren't citizens can serve in the army, and they serve for a period of 16 years, and they're going to get paid by the Roman government, which is going to add a huge debt. And the other thing is that it's going to do is it's going to make this professional army loyal to their commanders and not to the Senate or to Rome. And so again, it's eroding these traditional values. And Sulla made himself dictator for 6 years, which is way more than the 6-month time period. So you start to see things breaking down at a governmental and social and political area. You see rival armies marching on Rome, and people are looking for someone to provide the answers. And that someone becomes Julius Caesar. He's a brilliant military leader, but he's also a brilliant politician. And he kind of bribed his way to the top. He bribed him to keep himself alive several different times. People were sent to kill him, and he was able to get out of it. And because of his success and his popularity, people started to get fearful of it. And so, especially the Senate orders Caesar to disband his army, and Caesar marches his army to the Rubicon River, which would be the northern border of Italy, the Italian peninsula. And at that point, he has to make a decision. Do I march on Rome and commit treason and possibly die? Or do I leave my army here, ride into Rome, and definitely die? And he takes the option of marching on Rome. And to this day, to cross the Rubicon means to reach a point of no return. So don't be surprised to see that on the test. So Caesar ends up crushing his main competition, Pompey, who was once his friend and his partner, and became absolute ruler of Rome. He institutes lots of reforms. He creates public works jobs for the unemployed. He grants citizenship to lots of the conquered people. He expands the Senate and the number of people who can be tribunes. He adopts a calendar that's going to be used for the next 1,600 years. Our calendar is loosely based on the Caesarean calendar. And he also conquered much of the Mediterranean region. And not that he isn't doing things that benefit the poor people, he does. And not that he doesn't do things that benefit other conquered peoples, he does. But there is a political gain he gets from all of these things. He is getting their loyalty in exchange for these things. They are worshiping Caesar for kind of helping solve their problems. And so, again, he's going to continue to kind of be a threat to people. March 15th, the Ides of March, 44 BC, Caesar was stabbed by his rivals and his friends, which is going to lead to a civil war. Caesar's remembered as this military leader, Shakespearean play, and it's in the Shakespearean play where you find out that Brutus, one of Caesar's friends, is among the people who stabbed him. And as Caesar lay dying, he says in Shakespeare's play, "Et tu, Brute," you too, Brutus. And he was stabbed because the Senate believed that he was becoming too much of a dictator and had taken too much power. And he famously said, "Veni, vidi, vici," I came, I saw, I conquered. And Caesar's nephew Octavian is going to take over for him, and he's going to avenge Caesar's death because Mark Antony, another one of Caesar's friends, was in on this plot to kill Caesar. Octavian eventually gains control of the Roman Empire, Republic at that time, soon to be Empire, and he takes on the title Exalted One, but he's probably a little bit smarter politician than Caesar is. They have to beg him to take on this title, and he says, "No, I don't think so." And they keep asking him, "Oh, please, Augustus, oh, please, Augustus," or Octavian, "take this title of Augustus." And finally, after a long time, Octavian finally says, "Oh, you guys keep asking me. It's the least I could do." So he really kind of pushes this off to make it look like he doesn't want it. And what he does is, like Julius Caesar, he keeps a lot of things in place. The Senate's still there. People hold their positions. But a well-trained civil service who is hired based on their abilities and talents does most of the day-to-day running of the government, not the senators or the patricians. A census is taken to collect taxes fairly, and he builds a postal service, new roads, coins, helps with trade, and then he also does public works or farming for the unemployed to make sure that they have jobs. And one of the things that's going to come out of Augustus's government is he creates such a well-functioning government that it continues to run long after he's gone and no matter who's in charge. So later emperors varied in ability. You've got the five good emperors. Hadrian is one of those. Marcus Aurelius is one of those. And then you have several who are just off the charts. You've got Nero, who set a fire that burned Rome to the ground. You've got Caligula, who appoints his horse as consul. He is flat out crazy, and he is not a nice person by any stretch of the imagination. He does some horrible, horrible things. And the other one is Marcus Aurelius's son, Commodus, doesn't think he's Achilles, he believes he's Achilles. And he even fights in the Colosseum. Of course, he also has all the lion's teeth and claws pulled out. So even though he is somewhat crazy, he's not completely insane. He realizes that if he takes on a lion, he's probably going to die. So the other thing he'd like to do is he'd like to cut the Achilles tendons of the people he was going to fight so that way they couldn't do anything and all kinds of stuff. The real problem here is this, is that after Augustus, there's no method for picking who's going to be the next leader. There's no method of succession. It's not based on heredity. It's not based on merit. It's not based on elections. It's really whoever can gain control, and that's just no method for running a government. So no one really knows what's going on. There's a period of time where in like a 16-month period, there's 40 or 50 different emperors. It's just craziness. So despite that, from Augustus to Marcus Aurelius, there's this period of Roman peace, the Pax Romana. And it's during this time where Roman legions protect and maintain roads. You've got Roman fleets are chasing away pirates, grains coming from Egypt, trade caravans traveled from Africa, India, and China. Ideas, knowledge spread throughout the empire. So during this Pax Romana, trade and transportation and Roman armies freely flow. And as long as that's happening, things are pretty good in Rome. However, these underlying economic problems are being ignored, and public entertainments are just there to distract the people. It doesn't really solve anything. And so when we look at these two things that are designed to keep people busy and entertained, it really is hiding these underlying problems. They're only designed to pacify these restless mobs, to really kind of keep them in a stage of mind-numbing idiocy in some ways, and nothing is done to change the problem. So they spent a lot of money on these circuses and on these gladiatorial contests rather than actually fixing any real problems. And so when you look at this Colosseum, it really symbolizes Rome. It symbolizes the greatness of Rome, the things that it can do that's just unbelievable. It was built so tightly it could be filled with water so that you could have naval battles. 160-foot high walls, columns, arches, 80 entrances, 50,000 people. Supposedly the thing you could completely exit all 50,000 people in under 5 minutes. That's how well built it was. The bottom tier is for the emperor, priests, and senators. The top tier are for the slaves and the poor. So again, it's showing this inequity that's just blatantly there. The gladiators are slaves, convicts, or prisoners of war. Sometimes they're free Romans wanting political or fame, but their political purpose is to keep the poor and unemployed busy and happy. And so even though it shows Rome's greatness on the outside, it shows Rome's weakness on the inside when you've got these gladiators killing people and their thumbs up and thumbs down and blood and gore and guts. And so it really is this combination of greatness and the terrible problems it's facing